Hello, I'm Chris Fowler for Sports Century. At the wire, not even 6 degrees separated them, more like a length, a neck, or a nose, and sometimes not so much as a ray of daylight. The 1978 Triple Crown campaign, Affirmed and Alydar seemed to run as one, as they chased each other across 3 states over 5 spellbinding weeks. Each finish was a furious plunge to the wire, electrifying a nation. Alydar was the bigger, a slow-starting, long-striding, desperate closer. Affirmed was sleeker, more aerodynamic, preferring to grab the lead and never let it go.
If there's anything the public can sink their teeth into, it's a rivalry, no matter what the sport is.
A big rally by Ali.
Two of the best in what they do, meeting very often and not one dominating the other. That's what makes a great rivalry.
Now it's Alydar and Affirmed, and they're going to go at it heads apart on the turn.
Just something about putting 2 competitors in there that just keep knocking each other's brains out that seizes the soul of the American public.
Ball it's Affirmed, holding a slight lead. Alydar's charging at him. Coming on.
People today call it a rivalry if the same horses meet 2 or 3 times. These horses just kept going at it over and over.
Great goal. Affirmed once again draws forward by a length.
Whether you were watching on television or whether you were there in person, and you could tell that the other horses didn't exist. It was just those 2.
Affirmed coming back along the rail. It's Alydar and Affirmed, and these 2 still heads apart. Affirmed has a head in front nearing the wire.
I mean, they were battling in the final 16th of a mile. There would be Affirmed and Alydar, Affirmed and Alydar. You'd hear the call. And a couple of times it was too close to call.
It's Affirmed, Alydar on the outside. They come on down to the finish. Affirmed and Alydar. Here's the finish.
Affirmed and Alydar faced each other 10 times over 15 months. The rivalry was so fierce that its heat radiated well beyond the racing world. But nowhere did it stir deeper passions than in the barns and paddocks, where the 2 trainers engaged in a widely publicized mano-a-mano.
You can't have a rivalry just on paper. There's got to be some blood to it. There's got to be some fire. Lázaro Barrera and John Veitch were putting their macho on the line whenever Affirmed and Alydar ran, and you could tell.
I got a kick out of the sparring between the 2. I always felt that Laz was kidding and John wasn't.
Laz was very laid back. John was a little more tightly wrapped, or he appeared to be, than Laz Barrera.
All of the races that I wanted to win, Laz Barrera wanted to win with Affirmed. We weren't going to back down from him, and he certainly was not going to avoid us.
For Veitch, the duel was about something deeper than a trainer's bragging rights. Alydar was bred on American racing's most hallowed ground, where past generations of thoroughbred greatness whispered on the Kentucky wind.
Calumet Farm was the New York Yankees of horse racing. I mean, everybody knew Calumet Farm who didn't particularly follow racing. They were one of the great sports franchises in this country.
They dominated their sport like the Yankees dominated baseball. People expected a Calumet horse to be in contention for the Kentucky Derby, maybe even the Triple Crown.
Indeed, between 1941 and 1958, Calumet produced 7 Derby winners, including Triple Crown winners Whirlaway and Citation.
I came along and started covering racing in 1964. The farm was in the midst of a prolonged slump, and even during the lean years, they never gave up. And all of a sudden, when they got John Veitch to be their trainer in the mid-70s, things turned around.
Calumet Farm wanted to win the Kentucky Derby. And so when I got Alydar, he was to win the Kentucky Derby.
John Veitch was probably the most nervous trainer I've ever been around. I mean, the pressure on him from Calumet was so great.
Although they were well seasoned in the sport of kings, Affirmed owners PATRICE and Louis Wolfson were regarded as somewhat less than royalty. They bore 1 black mark. Louis had served 9 months in federal prison for failure to comply with SEC regulations.
Affirmed's ownership wasn't blue blood Kentucky for generations on end, but it was solid.
There's nothing establishment about Lou Wolfson except that he married well. Patrice had a great background in racing, but Lou always had his own way of doing things.
They were very good owners to ride for. They'd been in the game for a long time and had lots of good horses. Never one as good as Affirmed.
Starting conservatively, the Wolfsons debuted their talented 2-year-old in a maiden race. He won easily. Alydar, meanwhile, was strongly tested his first time out. Among the horses he had to beat in the youthful stakes was Affirmed.
The first time he ever ran, he was asked to run in a stake race. They can't be that ignorant. It's arrogance.
I was very confident. And first of all, there's more money offered in a stakes race. And the second thing is there's certainly a lot more prestige. So, you know, you're anxious as soon as you possibly can to make that leap from being just a regular winner and a stakes winner.
Affirmed on the inside once again takes the lead by a length and a half. Here comes Wood Native on the outside. Affirmed and Wood Native.
VEITCH's strategy backfired as Alydar finished 5th. But then he found his legs, winning his next 4 races, including a victory over Affirmed. In late August, they met again in the hopeful stakes at Saratoga. Riding Affirmed was teenage sensation Steve Coffin.
Tilt up along the rail, Affirmed on the outside, right there second, and Alydar on the far outside, right there third.
Alydar challenged and hooked up with him, and we really flew home that day.
Affirmed and Alydar. Affirmed along the inside, Alydar on the outside at the wire. It's Affirmed in front.
That was the day I realized that I'm not letting go of this horse.
Coming through the 2-year-old year, everybody thought Alydar was the better horse. And every time out that Affirmed would beat him, there'd be some sort of excuses and some sort of thoughts that Affirmed really just got lucky.
It's Alydar and Affirmed, and these two still heads apart. Affirmed has a head in front nearing the wire.
After back-to-back losses to Affirmed, VEITCH, with the blessings of Calumet's ownership, made a change, picking JORGE VELASQUEZ to ride Alydar in the prestigious Champagne Stakes at Belmont.
I talked to George and I said, I don't think you can sneak up on this horse. You've got to put yourself into a position where you can just overwhelm him.
And they're off. Oh, the lead. Along the inside, it's Sospo who goes out first, Affirmed in third. Then it's Alydar in fourth.
Alydar came wide down the middle of the stretch, and with a late flourish, you know, he kind of zipped by me before Affirmed even saw him.
It's Affirmed ahead, Derby Creek Road, but Alydar's coming at him, and it's Alydar on the outside who has a head in front.
He wasn't paying attention. He didn't see my horse until late at the 8th pole, and it was too late then.
Barrera was furious afterwards. He thought that Steve Coffin blew the race. You couldn't convince us of that. We outran him.
With the 2-year-old championship still in doubt in late October, Affirmed and Alydar faced off for a 6th time at the Laurel Futurity in Maryland.
I was very confident, and why not? I just whipped Affirmed. I want to do it again.
I always respected Alydar. I think possibly from the other side they lacked a little respect for us, and that might have been very costly for them.
A 16th of a mile to go. Affirmed on the outside by a neck. Alydar along the rail. Affirmed on the outside in front.
After the Laurel Futurity, I think we had tremendous confidence in him. Affirmed's tenacity just got it done.
Beating Alydar in 4 of 6 races, Affirmed was named the top 2-year-old of 1977. If racing fans expected the rivalry to resume that winter, they would have to wait.
They had a good rivalry at 2, and rather than continue it in Florida, which would have been the easy thing to do, Laz Barrera went out to California.
Laz turned to us and said, I'm sending him to California. I'm going to get him away from this horse.
I suspect, though, in the mind of both trainers was, we know what we've got here. We've got 2 potential superstars. They're going to battle it out all during their 3-year-old year. Let's don't start too soon.
Is running neck and neck into history. Affirmed and Alydar were furlongs apart in almost every other way.
The 2 horses really were very different types physically. Affirmed was kind of a light frame, narrow horse, not very charismatic, just to the point of being boring.
He wasn't robust or as masculine as a horse like Alydar was. It wasn't necessarily his looks that attracted you.
Every time I've thought of Affirmed, I've thought he's as neat as a pin. It's exactly what he was, not an ounce of wasted flesh. He was built very streamlined, but he had a deer-like quality to him.
Affirmed had a denim jacket on, and he'd be going, you know, carrying his lunchbox. Alydar, if he'd been a human, he'd had a cashmere sweater tied around his neck, and he'd been going to the tennis courts in his sports car.
It's like looking at Grace Kelly. You could see from a distance that, you know, there's something really special about beauty and charm and personality, and this horse had it.
Affirmed was the more precocious 2-year-old. He had more early speed. He was more of a professional racehorse. But people thought with time, Alydar will catch up to that.
Alydar just blossomed. He was bigger, better, stronger, tougher, more professional going into his 3-year-old year.
Affirmed was a very, very gritty game horse. I think he got one of the all-time great training jobs by Las Barrera. He had him right for every race.
Affirmed in front by 2, and it's Affirmed on the outside in front ahead. It's Affirmed going away to lead by 4 lengths. Affirmed on the outside in front.
Both horses started 1978 on opposite coasts. In April, Affirmed won the Hollywood Derby to finish his California campaign at 4-0. Alydar, meanwhile, was dominating Florida.
We were watching Affirmed on the West Coast, but Alydar was running in better times, especially his closing, last quarter miles. He was flying. That pumped us up. We said, wow, we have the best horse.
Finishing 3-0 in Florida, Alydar returned to Keeneland, Kentucky, where, in deference to Calumet's owners, Lucille and Gene Markey, it was decided that the 3-year-old would forego a trip north for the traditional Derby tune-up.
There was a choice between running in the Wood Memorial in New York or running in the Bluegrass, a mile from where Alydar was born and raised. The Admiral and Ms. Markey were at home and wanted to see their horse run.
The head of Keeneland called up the Markeys. He said, if I send a station wagon up for you and bring you down and park it in the middle of the home stretch, would you like to come? He said, yeah, we would.
And as the horses came out of the post parade and began to warm up, JORGE VELASQUEZ brought Alydar over to the rail.
Hello, George. Hello, my lady. How are you? How you feel? Fine. Here's your baby. Doesn't he look pretty? He looks wonderful.
Coming into the home stretch, he was leading. He had taken the lead, and he's starting to pull away, and suddenly this old lady is out of the car, on the rail with her fist in the air saying, go, go, go.
And I thought later on that if that had to be their last glimpse of a Calumet horse running in person, as indeed it was, what a spectacular memory that had to be for them.
But as they're nearing the finish, it's Alydar just drawing away with the lead with every stride under the wire.
Racing fans couldn't wait for the next time Affirmed and Alydar would race, because we knew that if these two guys held together, the Triple Crown of 1978 was going to be unforgettable.